It was a sunny day in Southern California, but behind the bright facade of Hollywood's glamour, a dark and sinister figure lurked. This is the story of Michael Thomas Gargiulo, a man who would come to be known as the Hollywood Ripper. Hi, I'm Ash, your guide through the dark alleys of true crime and the corridors of intriguing history, all while we whip up a delicious feast for both the mind and the mouth. And today, we're going to be discussing the crimes of the Hollywood Ripper. Michael Gargiulo's journey into infamy began in the quiet suburbs of Glenview, Illinois, where he lived an unassuming life. But little did anyone know he harbored a chilling secret. Michael Thomas Gargiulo was born on February 15th of 1976. Like I said before, in Glenview, Illinois. It's a picturesque town that's situated outside of Chicago. Growing up, he appeared to have a relatively typical childhood. He lived with his family, which includes his parents and his siblings, in a middle-class neighborhood. I'm going to call him Michael from now on because his last name, I'm not even sure how to pronounce it, but his family life was ordinary, except for the fact he had 7 siblings. He has told people later on in life that he was abused by his father and by his siblings, but no one else has ever corroborated. I can't say that word. No one else has ever agreed with those claims. As he entered into his teenage years, he became known as a bully, though, with a quick temper and was said to be a compulsive liar. One of his friends even recalled that Michael could go from being pleasant to almost inhuman in a split second. As a teenager, he also started getting a rap sheet with the local police for breaking and entering into cars and for fighting with people. And he became fascinated with Ted Bundy, and he would read any forensic science book he could get his hands on. He's quoted as saying that if he ever got caught for a crime, he would either know how to get out of it or he would lie until he died. There are no widely known accounts of Michael displaying severe behavioral issues as a youth. Oftentimes, those things are missed. And in a family of 7 children, there's a lot that's probably overlooked. Not that they weren't good parents, but it's just there's only so many hours in a day, and you might miss what will lead to their eventual path. And even when there is troubling behavior, it might not be apparent to those around him that means he's a serial killer. But whatever his reasons for turning to his crimes, way more important than his life was the lives of his victims and the lives that they led. So let's look at his first victim, who was Tricia Pacasio. Tricia was born August 15th, 1974 in Glenview, Illinois. She grew up in the same suburban community where her life would be tragically taken and in the same community where Michael grew up. Tricia was described as a vivacious and friendly young woman who had dreams of a bright future, and she had that bright future ahead of her. She attended Glenbrook South High School. She had just graduated, and she was known for her outgoing and sociable personality. She was well liked by her peers and her close circle of friends, and she had just been accepted to Purdue University. She was going to be going there for an engineering degree that fall. On August 13th, Tricia had gone out with friends to a TGI or a TGIF. It's called both. The report said TGI, but I've only ever known of a TGIF, so I don't know. I'm sorry. But it was going to be one of their last opportunities to get together as a group before they all left for their different universities. That night, they stayed together until about 1 a.m., and that was the 14th. Tricia was the driver, so she dropped everyone off, and then she drove home. This is where her life took a devastating turn. Between 1 and 2 in the morning, she was grabbed and her arm was twisted so hard that it broke. Then her assailant, who we now know as Michael, stabbed her 17 times with a kitchen knife on the stoop beside her door to her home. He stabbed her in the heart, in the lung, the abdomen, the collarbone, and in the back. Her father was the one who discovered her lifeless body the following morning. He was taking their dog out for a walk. He saw her white tennis shoes sticking up, and when he realized what he was seeing, he fell to his knees and screamed. His screams echoed through the neighborhood, and he and his wife actually had to be taken to the hospital for shock. It wasn't a shock for them, it was a shock for the whole community, all the family. Trisha was the sister also of a friend of Michael's. So when she was found, another point, she was found clutching her keys in her hand, and she had fought hard. There was DNA underneath her fingertips, but it would be years before they could test it because DNA was in its infancy. But Trisha's death deeply affected those around her, and her memory would be linked to this crime that went unsolved for 18 years. Michael killed Trisha. After that, he started sending gifts to her family. He sent a t-shirt to her dad. He sent vouchers to a restaurant and flowers to her mom. And then he showed up at their house saying he needed to talk to Rick, dad. He waited for him to get home from work for almost an hour before he left abruptly without saying a word. The family at the time thought that was weird and told the police, but they just made a note of it and never followed up on it. But Michael was not arrested until 2011. And that's when her family was able to get a little bit of closure. But Michael went from there to the glitzy streets of Los Angeles. Maybe he was seeking refuge from the prying eyes of law enforcement. And it was here in the city of dreams that he embarked on a terrifying spree of violence. He was abusive to his girlfriends. He was accused of raping one of them. And then 8 years later, the next victim was found, Ashley Ellerin. Ashley was born on April 6, 1978 in Los Altos, California. She grew up in that same area, and she was known to be beautiful and vivacious. Friends and family described her as friendly, outgoing, and full of life. Ashley attended Los Altos High School, and from there she was accepted into the Los Angeles Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising. And her dream was to become a fashion designer. So in this environment, she's living in Los Angeles, going to school. She's hoping to make her mark in the industry. And because she was known as such a social person, she had a really wide circle of friends. She also was starting to meet celebrities. She was sharing a bungalow with her friends in a nice neighborhood that was right off the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And like, think of these celebrities. She briefly dated Vin Diesel, Jeremy Sisto. Then in the fall of 2000, she met Michael Gargiulo. He helped her change the tire on her car, and then they exchanged numbers because he lived right across the street from where she was living. But after that, he became obsessed with her. He started stalking her by some accounts. Then in December of 2000, she started talking to an up-and-coming actor, Ashton Kutcher. Ashley's life took a tragic turn on February 21st. It was the day of the Grammys, and she had a date planned for that night with Ashton Kutcher. It was a Grammys after party that they were going to go to together. They'd spoke on the phone in the morning, made dinner plans for that night. After that, Ashley spent the day with her dad, who was visiting from out of town. Then she had a date with her landlord, Mark. They were dating off and on, and they saw each other intimately that day. Then at about 8 o'clock that night, Ashton called again and said, he's running late. Can they just have drinks instead of dinner? She agreed because she had just gotten out of the shower and her other boyfriend had just left. But then at 10:15, Ashton called again and went to her house, but he left without her. Keep a pin in that. She'd already been brutally murdered in her home. And at the time, Michael, who would later become known as the Hollywood Ripper, stabbed her 47 times in a horrific and just such a gruesome attack. The murder, it was shocking and senseless. That's what the authorities said. And again, it sent shockwaves through the community. It was a nice neighborhood. Ashley's injuries included a wound that nearly severed her head and deep punctures to the chest, the stomach, and to her back. Some of her wounds were up to 6 inches deep. And according to a detective, Tom Small, a one-stab wound actually penetrated her skull and took a chunk out the size of a puzzle piece. There was a special on Snapped, and it was called Snapped, Notorious Hollywood Ripper. And so he said in his interview, it was about 9:15 a.m. on February 22nd when we got the call. And when I got into that crime scene and I saw the condition that she was left in, it was probably one of the more gruesome crime scenes that I have seen. Small said. Her roommate had called it in when she'd returned home that morning. When she was found, it was obvious that she had been attacked while she was preparing for her date with Ashton. The bathtub was still damp, her hairdryer was sitting on the counter, and her curling iron had been left on the toilet seat. But there were signs around that it was even more horrific. Her body had been posed, and when the authorities found her, her hair looked as if it had not been dried yet. So she'd probably gotten out of the shower. There was also, they said, blood all over the place. I don't know if you've ever cut yourself when it's wet, but the blood spreads even more. But when they said all over the place, they meant the doors, the walls, the floors. It had saturated into the carpet. She had defensive wounds on her hands and on her arms, and she was stabbed over 47 times, and her throat was slit. She was found outside her bedroom door. One thing that was interesting at the time was her bungalow was really secure. There were 2 entrances, so they knew there was a good possibility that she knew her killer and let him in. So her friends started turning over names of people that knew her. One of the names her friends turned over was Mike, the furnace man. Guess who that was? So there was a lot of things happening, though, in her investigation. Ashton Kutcher was not investigated, but questioned about it. And so the fact that Ashton was involved garnered a lot of media attention at the time, but it kind of died down. It went away until last week when Ashton wrote a letter supporting Danny Masterson, who has just been convicted of rape. It's become a new topic of conversation. And there's a real possibility that Ashton may have made some pretty stupid decisions right after her death. Decisions that may have, actually, I'm not even going to go there. I'm going to try to link a video in right here that shows a little bit more, but I would suggest watching Aaron Smith-Levin's coverage on the topic. I'll put his channel in the description box below and hopefully the video too. But
then I saw what I thought was red wine on the carpet. He thought it might have been spilled wine from the party. After Kutcher found out what really happened to Ellerin, he called the police since his fingerprints were on her door and was admittedly freaking out. However, Kutcher was never considered a suspect, according to the police. Gargiulo was charged with Ellerin's murder, as well as the murder of Maria Bruno. Well, Maria Bruno was murdered much time after Ashley Ellerin was murdered. Now, here's the thing. Ashton Kutcher lied about not knowing that she was lying dead on the floor in the house. He lied about it. It's a pretty big lie. Now, he didn't lie about it because he had a role in it. Ashton Kutcher was not he did not play a role in the death of Ashley Ellerin. But because Ashton chose, let me gather my thoughts here. What really happened is Ashton Kutcher showed up to the house to pick Ashley Ellerin up for her date. He opened the door. He walked into the house. You could not see the body on the floor from the entryway to the house. He walked into the house. He looked over to the area where he saw her dead body lying on the floor. She was stabbed like 47 times, covered in blood everywhere. Freaked out, left the house, and for about the next hour sat in his car outside the house calling various members of his team for advice on what the hell to do. And his team advised him that he should not call the police. He should not be the one to report this. It should not be known that he was there. He doesn't want to be the one who discovered the body. That 70s show was only a couple years old at this point. Ashton Kutcher was not a household name. They essentially said, this is all you'll be known for. People will think you did it, all this kind of stuff. This will be what people think of when they think of Ashton Kutcher. You don't want that. Go to the party. Go to the party that you were picking Ashley up to take her with you to. Go to the party and then go home. Now, I'm not making any representations that these are the exact words that were spoken. I'm not even naming the members of Ashton's team that he called. But there's someone else that he called. Danny Masterson. He called frickin' Danny Masterson. That's how close these guys were. In fact, the night before Ashley was killed, Ashton and Danny and some other people from that 70s show were hanging out at Ashley's house. Okay. So where am I going with this? How did Ashton's lies allow a murderer to kill again? The police knew who had killed Ashley Ellerin. They could not prosecute the killer because Ashton Kutcher's lies about discovering the body, saying that he didn't, his lies about the whole thing created so much reasonable doubt, would have been used by the defense attorneys to create reasonable doubt to get the killer off of the murder charges, that they chose not to prosecute the person that was their number one suspect for the murder.
Definitely adds a new layer to this story, for sure. Now, 4 years later, Michael's rampage continued in 2005 when he stabbed his neighbor, 32-year-old Maria Bruno, as she was stabbed to death on December 1st. Maria was a mother of 4 who was starting fresh in a new apartment complex in East LA. She had recently separated from her husband, and this was supposed to be her new start. She had 2-year-old twins, a 4-year-old, and a 5-year-old, who at the time were with her husband or other family. But on December 1st, it was only 10 days after she had moved into her apartment. Her ex found her body. They were trying to work things out.
Husband found her mutilated body and called 911.
Okay. And when I get inside, there's a pool of blood. Okay.
Michael had literally butchered her with a knife while she slept. He stabbed her 17 times, cutting her neck again so severely like the others that she was almost decapitated. He then cut off her breasts, placed one of them in her mouth, and as with Ashley Ellerin, he posed her body before leaving the scene. The only evidence that was left was a partial blue surgical shoe cover with some of Maria's blood on it that had been dropped in the parking lot. It was revealed that Michael had broken in through her kitchen window at about 1 a.m. and killed her with a knife from her own kitchen. Experts determined that the killer, at that time, they didn't know who it was, but he was left-handed. And initially they believed her ex had done it, because it's always the ex. And they kind of parted on bad terms. But the fact that they were trying to get back together, he was eventually ruled out. One detective said it looked like she was killed just for the sake of it. But this quiet neighborhood in El Monte was now gripped with fear, and they thought they knew who had done it. There was another new neighbor across the courtyard from her. They believed he had killed her because he was acting weird. And they were right, because that neighbor was Michael, but he had already disappeared. Not all of Michael's attempts were successful, though. About 2.5 years after Maria's death, on April 28, 2008, he attacked 26-year-old Michelle Murphy in her Santa Monica home. She woke up to see Michael with a hoodie and a hat on. Michelle was petite at 5'1" tall, and he easily overpowered her. Michael jumped on top of her in her bed, stabbing her with a knife, but she managed to fight him off. She fought back fiercely. She grabbed the blade with both hands to stop him from stabbing her and tried to gain control of it. She was also screaming bloody murder. Literally, I guess. And it was an apartment complex, so she knew someone would hear her. Then she pulled her knees up to her chest and kicked him as hard as she could. It caused him to fall off the bed. He got up and he ran out of the room, yelling sorry over his shoulder at her. Michelle then called her boyfriend, who called the cops.
She told me that she woke up and there was someone on top of her and she forced them off and they ran out. So we are on our way. The fire department is already on the way and we're on our way. What's this person look like? He's actually like a long sleeve, like structured kind of thing. You don't know how big this guy was? How tall he was? He was I don't know, like 5'11" or something.
A jury is expected to decide the fate of the so-called Hollywood Ripper. And today, one of his victims who escaped relived her terrifying encounter with the killer. CBS 2's Randy Page was in the courtroom for her emotional testimony.
Or to the victims.
We can show you the courtroom, the attorneys, and convicted serial killer Michael Gargiulo. But we can't show you today's witness, Michelle Murphy, because she did not want her testimony videotaped. The judge did allow us, though, to record her voice as she told the jury about the night back in 2008 when she fought off Gargiulo and gave police critical evidence that broke the serial murder case wide open. Michelle was alone, asleep in her bed, when Gargiulo broke in through a living room window, went to her bedroom, and began stabbing her. Michelle Murphy fought back, causing Gargiulo to cut his wrist, and as he ran away, he left a trail of blood with his own DNA.
I think confusion was what I remember most, not like really understanding what was happening in that moment. I think for a second you think, are you dreaming? And then when you wake up and realize that this is real life and this is happening.
Michelle Murphy spoke about the courage of victims who did not survive. 18-year-old Tricia Pacaccio, stabbed to death outside her Illinois home in 1993. 22-year-old Ashley Ellerin, stabbed 47 times in her Hollywood home in 2001 while preparing to go on a date with actor Ashton Kutcher. Maria Bruno, stabbed and mutilated in her El Monte apartment in 2005. Then Michelle Murphy spoke about the day her baby was born.
To bring a child into this world and to experience that joy. All I can do is think about the parents, Tricia and Ashley and Maria, and the fact that that was taken from them so viciously by such a monster that just destroys me.
That was the final statement Michelle Murphy made on the witness stand today. She stepped down, walked into the arms of her husband, and cried.
Her 911 call is so calm. I was proud of her. Another thing that she did, her attacker was left-handed, but he'd cut his hand on the knife, so his DNA was at the scene. It provided a crucial link to his crimes. Michael's reign of terror finally came to an end in June of 2008 when he was arrested by the Santa Monica Police Department. That was for the attempted murder of Michelle Murphy. 3 months later, he was charged with the murders of Ashley Ellerin and Maria Bruno, but it would take another 3 years before he was charged with Tricia's murder. Michael was charged for the murders in California and Illinois. Here's another chilling point. He's known as a liar, so who knows if it's true. But Michael allegedly told authorities in LA County Jail that just because 10 women were killed and his DNA was present doesn't mean he murdered anyone, leading investigators to believe there are more victims out there he just hasn't been connected to yet. The media in LA dubbed him the Hollywood Ripper and also the Chiller Killer. His trial was filled with delays. He was just a jerk about it. But it finally began in May 2019. Even Ashton Kutcher took the stand to testify about what had happened. Prosecutors painted Michael as a killer who charmed women and suggested he was what appeared to be a friendly neighbor and handyman, and then he would break into their homes and stab them to death. Finally, on August 15th, 2019, Michael was convicted on all counts, and the penalty phase of his trial began. The jury deliberated on October 18th A verdict of death was rendered for Michael for the murders of Ashley and Maria and the attempted murder of Michelle. The story doesn't end there. Michael Gargiulo now faces extradition to Illinois for the 93 murder of Tricia. He may face an additional 25 years to life. Now, this week, a lot of people are remembering this case because of that completely different case of Danny Masterson. But for those who are personally affected by Michael's crimes, I'm sure there's not a day they don't remember. These beautiful women, they were deeply loved. And I can't imagine how hard it is for the families that it took so long for this monster to be convicted. But hopefully, the fact that he will never see daylight without bars in the way brings them some comfort now. And hopefully, Michelle finds comfort in the fact that she's a strong, powerful badass. So that's the story of the Hollywood Ripper. He was a chilling figure whose crimes haunt the memories of those who lived through his reign of terror. But the question remains, how many more secrets lie hidden behind the masks of ordinary neighbors? Okay, guys, these last two videos have been so disturbing to say the least. I always have so many questions, so there's like a tenth of what I've researched in the videos because I am the queen of the rabbit hole. So the next time we meet, I'm going a lot lighter. I am going on a white fang hunt to Alabama, and I hope you'll join me down the rabbit hole. Until then, stay kind and remember to take care of yourself. I'll see you soon.